So, if you can't maintain a 3 to 4 word conversation, you're not running a tempo. I don't think I was running a tempo. Alright, so the goal today, I'm gonna do a little bit of a tempo run. Haven't been on YouTube for a while. I'm gonna do a tempo likely a lot slower than I'd want, but that's because I'm rebuilding fitness. And so one of the things we'll sort of talk about today is just how you manage that, getting yourself back into training. I'm actually a big responder to pushing tempo a little bit harder, but the problem is I haven't trained, call it full, as a professional for probably about a year and a half now. I have ran 2:09 for a marathon. I was a professional for a really long time. I did go to the Olympics, but it's like, yawn, that was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And so I almost need to rebuild a foundation, which is almost like a base layer of fitness. And then when you build that base layer of fitness, that's when you can do sort of like, call them push reps, call them harder tempos, and then you sort of get a reaction. So there's no point doing a harder tempo if all it does is almost sets you back. When you've built that sort of really nice base layer and you've built that foundation, then you can do the harder tempos, then you can do the push reps, and you find the body moves forward, which means when you come back a week later, you come back 2 weeks later, you're better. Whereas if you do those too soon, you come back a week later, you come back 2 weeks later, you can often be worse because you're just tired. And so we're rebuilding that foundation. We're trying to get sort of back into the training. We're trying to get things going again. Once I do the sort of easier tempo, we will do sort of like a little bit of fun at the end. It's sort of like a 5-minute thing where you do a couple of sprints and you hold a bit. And so we'll do that at the end, but we've got to be disciplined in the tempo first. All right, so warm-up's done. The loop's roughly about 1 mile. We're in Belfast here. This is called Victoria Park. So I'm gonna do 4 laps tempo. Like I said, I'm gonna have to be pretty disciplined. I'll keep the heart rate where it needs to be. Warm-up's just 2 mile jog. I do some of those drills, I do some stretches, I do some strides. I just sort of make sure I'm ready to go. And really you're just trying to like prevent injury, or literally once you set off in your tempo, you don't want something to suddenly snap or go. So decent warm up. We're going to get into the tempo. I'll let you know how it goes, and then we'll do that little bit of sort of sprinting stuff at the end. Alright, so I have some advice here for that tempo. I've just finished the 4 mile tempo. It probably came out about 5:05 per mile. Maybe I'm working a little bit too hard, but that's kind of okay. I know it completely undermines what I said about building that foundation, but I'm not going to sort of like punish myself for working a bit too hard. So I kind of got into the tempo. Lap 1, you're just trying to sort of find that rhythm. You're trying to find that sort of like, how am I feeling? Lap 2, you're doing your best to try to get comfortable. But when I say get comfortable, you don't want to get too comfortable that pace slows. So what I'm trying to do with the psychology is say, how can I make this easier? As in, I want the effort to be easier, but I don't want the pace to be slower. And that's the real key. So the key to a good tempo or a good race is to learn how to sort of like let the effort come a bit easier, but the pace remain quick. So you're doing your sort of psychology stuff where it's like, let's calm things down, let's drop the shoulders, let's not sort of tense up, let's get as relaxed as we possibly can, but don't try to slow the pace, right? So there's 2 things happening. You're moving that sort of physiology forward, but you're also improving that psychology that it's able to maintain a good pace, but let that effort sort of drop a little bit. And so that's the real key. So I sort of find lap 3, I'm sort of telling that psychology, let's make this lap the easiest, but the quickest, right? And then what you're really sort of exploring is, how can I calm the psychology down so that it's not working overdrive, it's not thinking we're working super hard, but maintain that good pace. And I feel like that's a good trick, because normally you get into that sort of 3rd mile of maybe a 4 mile tempo. For most people that might be the hardest, but almost by making that decision, I'm gonna make this mile the easiest of the tempo so far. 1 second. So you're in the thick of the tempo, mile 3 or 4. Instead of focusing on, this is going to be the toughest mile of the tempo, I'm subconsciously making a decision that, how do we make this mile the easiest mile of the tempo? I still want it to be quick, but I'm relaxing the shoulders, I'm doing long exhales, and I'm focusing on all the little things that can make it easier, but not slower. I think sometimes you sort of panic, you get a bit anxious, you assume that the 3rd mile should be one of the hardest, or possibly the 4th.
But by consciously saying, this is going to be the mile that's the easiest, this is going to be the mile where I'm going to feel most comfortable, you can almost trick your body into doing all the things that's going to add to that. So that was a good sort of tempo. I've took a little bit of recovery now, and I'm going to jump into those sort of sprints. The reason I do sprints, you basically do 15 seconds hard, you pause for 15 seconds hard, and it's just because tempo rhythm isn't really that fast. So in that sort of tempo rhythm, I'm working at sort of like 5:05 per mile. It is above tempo, it is pretty hard, but you still want to keep that sort of like pace in the legs. So by doing the 15 seconds hard, 15 seconds stop, 15 seconds hard, you do that for 5 minutes, you get to turn the legs over pretty quickly, and you keep that sort of speed in the legs. All the races that we're running now are won by being the quickest, and so you still want to be able to run quick. Tempo pretty good. Let's jump into this and then I'll close it out. All right, so job done. That finisher is really good. Couldn't sort of recommend that highly enough. Do your tempo, get the sort of good tempo work done, take sort of 2 to 3 minutes recovery, and then go 15 seconds hard, stand for 15 seconds, and then run back the way you came for 15 seconds hard. Because you're sort of sprinting, you basically deplete what's called your like ATP system, and it gets really tough to sort of hold that pace towards the end. You can build that to 7.5 minutes or 10 minutes, but a really good way to sort of finish out a tempo. Look, I haven't been posting on sort of YouTube much, and to be honest, I could have posted on YouTube. I've been trying to build a business, 262clo.com, and I could have probably posted once a week. It probably would have sort of like generated sales and all this stuff, but I never wanted YouTube to be a place where I just tried to sell things to people. And so because I wasn't sort of training and my sort of attitude wasn't positive perhaps towards running, in terms of actually getting faster, actually getting better, actually thinking about racing again, it's hard for me to post YouTube videos and like almost be selling a lie. I'm kind of getting that motivation back. As you just seen, I worked pretty hard in that tempo. I am starting to sort of get excited about thinking about racing again. And if you want to race and you want to sort of run well, then you've got to sort of do the work and training. So it naturally made sense to sort of come back to YouTube as I build back into sort of some harder training. And then hopefully I have some real stuff to talk about. Real stuff because I'm actually out there doing it. And then while I'm doing it, I sort of think, you know what, that might sort of help people. So that's today's video wrapped up. I hope you enjoyed that. Get that sort of tempo done. If you are in a rebuilding phase, don't be afraid to slow it down. I didn't today, which means I didn't really sort of hit the objective of today. But again, I'm not going to punish myself for that. I also run because it's really good for the mental health, and I got that benefit today. You can check out 262clo.com if you like. At the minute, we're doing a free training plan with any sort of order of shorts. And we're also doing, if you've ordered in the past and spent over £75, you get the masterclass for free. But take care.